Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. I am Payal, and I work as a managing partner designer at the Thinking Hats. And we are an innovation consultancy. We work at the intersection of brand, customer, and employee experiences. And we, of course, implement service design thinking principles to serve our clients. I am hosting this speaker series as a chair of ISSIP Service Design speaker series. And thank you for being here with us today. We have Mauricio, who's super popular with the students at SCAD and also amongst his colleagues. He has prepared a wonderful presentation for us. And I'll hand it over to him. I'd ask him to introduce himself, and then we can get started from there. Over to you, Mauricio. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just say good morning. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, all for inviting and the whole ISSIP board. A pleasure to be here talking about service design. I'm having issues with my internet connection, so I will turn the camera off, and you have my voice and the presentation. And at some point, if we have stable internet connection, I will turn the camera on again. Okay, so let's start. Let me just turn the camera off. So we'll be talking today about breaking down service prototyping. Okay, I will start with providing a little bit of context, how I see service design, so the discussion about the prototyping can have a more rich background, okay? As they all said, my name is Mauricio Manhaes. I teach at SCAD, Savannah College of Art. I am the grad program coordinator. I have a PhD in knowledge management from the university in Brazil, the Federal University of Santa Catarina, and in a partnership with the Cannes International School of Design. I'm connected to the Service Design Network, the headquarters in Cologne, Germany. And I'm also connected to the Live Work office in São Paulo. Okay, just a little background. So, what is service design? I like very much to start with this example. Back in the day, like 2 months ago, I used to Uber everywhere here in Savannah, and every time that I got an Uber, the driver would see that I have a badge, a SCAD badge, and would ask, "Oh, what do you teach?" And I would say, expecting some strange moments, I would say, "I teach service design." And after 30 seconds of a strange silence, the driver would ask me, "What is service design?" Okay, and I always mention this situation because, by all means, Uber, the service Uber, is a service design project, right? The complexities, the networks, the set of elements that had to be coordinated, orchestrated, the system that has to be put in place to enable the Uber service is, at least from my perspective, a service design project. And it is interesting to to see a person that makes a living out of a service design solution doesn't know what service design is. And I think it's very paradigmatic to kind of set the stage to discuss about service design. Okay? Service is everywhere. You're living inside the web of service, and most of the time, people don't know what service design is. Okay? Um, and again, I don't think that is easy or even achievable to have a precise definition of service design. And one post that I wrote on LinkedIn talks about this. I think it's way more important to expose people to service design than try to define. And this is not a situation that only service design faces. Okay, if you ask to anyone if they know what is accounting or what an accountant does, people would usually say yes, would nod with their head saying yes, I know. But if you ask them, can you give me a precise definition what is accounting? Nobody would be able to give you. Or most people would not be able. They know what an accounting is because they were exposed enough to that profession, but not because they have a precise definition, okay? And this is not only, as I mentioned before, it doesn't happen only with service design. Most professions, they don't have a precise definition, okay? But anyway, we have several of them. One is given by the Service Design Network, and service design choreographs processes, technologies, and interaction within complex systems. So the key word would be orchestrate these complex systems in order to co-create value for relevant stakeholders. If you know a little bit about service dominant logic, you see that this definition connects very well with the frameworks and the perspective offered by the service dominant logic. Here at SCAD, again, we define service design, again, based on complexities and understanding complexity and opportunities of a business. Of course, here we have a more focused attention on the business side of service design, and based on designing relationships in this complex system that any service seems to be structured by. The relationship between organization and their customers is one of our main focus, okay? Just to give a sense for the ones that would rather see a more, let's say, academic perspective, we approach service design here from a socio-technical design, very much drawn from evolutionary epistemology, with three main areas, which are innovation, and then Campbell and Simonton in the sense of creativity, right? Through processes of blind various selective retention, data construction, Habermas, we have approaches to data in three different perspectives: instrumental, practical, emancipatory, and then service systems, heavily based on service dominant logic, and all of this from a social context, okay? It's not the individual, it's the social level. Services happen in social contexts, in groups, and we're focusing not on, let's say, psychology. We're most concerned with sociological aspects of the service. Um, this is a kind of a summary of this framework that I just presented. It was based on a research that MFA students at SCAD did, interviewing service designers across the world. And we define that usually a project of service design should enable a company or a group or a service provider to understand stakeholders' context, which we call the state A of a system, understand innovation dynamics, which would be where can we go from the state A, what would be state B, and understand institutional transition or implementation, the bridge. So when we develop a service design project, we usually have 3 sets of deliverables for the client, giving the client an understanding of the state A, the now, an understanding where it could go in terms of innovation, and how to get there. All of this happening under or inside this system that we call service. Okay. And in a more specific way, so we call service design a project. So you can have a project, a service design project. You can have a practice. So service design is the practice, the person, the service designer. And service design is also the economic business cycle. So the economic business cycle we see from the service development logic perspective is based on service and is designed because it's an iterative process, right? Several companies offer different services, and at some point it evolves to a format, a standard format, and then it's disrupt again. And so we use the term service design to define these 3, let's say, perspectives on the work or the professional work that can be done through a service design lens. A little bit more to position service design, UX, and CX. From a service design perspective, we see user experience as a discipline focused on how humans interact with objects or non-human thing. We tend to discuss that humans don't use humans, they use objects. So let's say this experience you're having now, you're using Zoom, you're using your computer, but you're not using me. I'm not using you. We should not use humans. So the user, when you see someone as a user, you kind of focus this human from the human interaction with object, not with people. The same way goes to customer, right? Humans are not always customer. Let's say you buy a shirt in a store. Once you bought the shirt, you get the shirt, okay? So it's a very straightforward relationship. Going back to a teaching, education, or healthcare, you can't always get what you want, paraphrasing Rolling Stone, right? It's not because you're paying your fees at SCAD that you're getting your degree, okay? There's more at play than your role as a customer. As a customer, you would not come to SCAD or to any other university or school if it was just a matter of paying and getting your degree as the way you buy a shirt. Okay, there's more to it. So service design values very much these disciplines, of course, no question about, but we tend to say that there's more to any relationship between a company and a human than just using objects or paying. Much more needs to be taken into account, and especially in environments like government, banking, healthcare, education, or even organizational adaptability. There's much more at play than just this transactional level of focus. And we have several examples. We can discuss this, how focusing. So imagine a government service that has a customer experience focus. We think from a service design perspective that is very questionable to treat citizens as customers. Okay, it's simplifying too much a very complex relation. In service design, we tend to work well with complexities and thinking that through understanding complexities, you can create or co-create more value than a narrowly focused perspective. So the metaphor that I like to use is that you need to know which game are you playing. If you're focusing only on the money flow, you definitely should play the game that customer experience provides. Frameworks, perspectives. If you're focusing on how humans are interacting with objects, you definitely should use or play the game that is the UX proposes. But you, at some point, need to take this step back and see how all these parts integrate, especially if we reflect on what's happening with COVID and all the pandemics. We need to be aware of the potentials of problems and opportunities that complexity, a complex perspective on things can bring. Okay? So, in a way, the message here is especially based on service domain logic and the whole design approach to developing new services. You are practicing service design, either you're aware of or not. Okay. The only thing would be better to know which game you're playing each time, so you can be more effective. Okay? It would be like playing soccer when the game is football. The rules that you're playing are not consistent to the actual game you're playing. So knowing this, which game you're playing would help you create better products, be it good or service. Okay? So, but again, sometimes when I present this perspective, people react in a very defensive way, and drawing from the service domain logic again, there's no boundary. So from a service design perspective, the customer experience is fundamental. The user experience is unquestionable, but it's not enough. So we are not advocating any kind of exclusion of either this or that. We're advocating a better integration of all these different perspectives and much more. Okay, I'm just focusing on customer experience and user experience, but we from a service design perspective, we need fashion designers, we need architects, we need interior designers, we need sound designers, we need everybody. Okay, so the more you bring aboard, the more you can orchestrate these people, the better. Good. Any questions so far? I'm not following up if we have any questions, but
If anyone, thanks, Mauricio. If anybody from the participants has any questions, please feel free to type in the chat channel, or you can raise your hand and then I can like just ask you to talk directly.
oh, sorry.
Okay, I can get started actually. This was very interesting and thank you so much. Very clear and you kind of broke it down to help everyone understand the key differences between UX, CX, and service design, and how service design is over encompassing. And that's a question that I think is like everyone is always kind of hearing a lot. So yeah, thank you for sharing your perspective on that. So I wanted to actually ask you, so you spoke about, stakeholders and including them in the conversation. So how do you kind of, in your experience, if you've ever had, how do you one decide, who should be the key stakeholders for a particular project? And how do you convince the stakeholders? That's the second part of the question. How do you convince the stakeholders for their participation?
Again, it's still a design process, right? So we will talk about why prototyping is interesting, because involving that many and different stakeholders, you always have a first phase of trying out different alternatives, right? It would be very hard to have a standard approach to how to involve these people. What we advocate at first is have a first step of prototyping the approach, which approach can offer better opportunities to interact with different types of stakeholders. So we will discuss, but basically is prototyping this. One of the things that I always discuss with our students, and even in projects, sometimes it's even hard to schedule a meeting with one of your clients. Mm-hmm. Okay? So how do you go about? Oh, you try, so let's try Monday morning, or I have Monday morning, Thursday afternoon, and Friday noon, around noon. Then the client, you try to meet the client, and then you discover that Monday morning was a bad idea. Never meet the client again on Monday morning. So the faster, the simpler way you can rapidly get to the combination of things that will work for the specific context, the better. Okay, so it's not a matter of having a standard procedure. It's a matter of prototyping an approach, several different approaches, as soon as possible, as quickly as possible, so you can very fast get to the one combination that works best for each client. Okay? I hope it answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going for one more since I'm not hearing from anyone else. Uh,
Mhm.
so you shared some examples, and you spoke about how service design is not just for it's not just UX and CX, but it's really uh, exists in like different bodies like the government, banking, org adaptability, healthcare.
Mhm.
So, could you share an example and looking at like today's scenario, how the government or the healthcare could really benefit from implementing, service design thinking in their processes?
Yes, the actually, Bill, I want to finish with this. So the last one of the last slides are exactly reflecting about everything we discussed and how this would be applied at this very moment, the moment we're going through.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so maybe we could reserve. Um,
Sure. Yeah. I can hold on to that. We have a couple of questions coming up.
mhm.
Uh, and so Patrick is saying customer experience, user experience, and service design all suffer when they are disconnected from business or organizational strategy. How
Mhm.
does service design close this gap to ensure prototypes and experiments lead result in impact at scale? Great question, Patrick.
Yeah, Patrick, nice to have you here. Um, Again, Patrick, and you know the answer. Um, uh, what we so we advocate service design is fundamentally built on the context, right? We think that if a client is hiring us to do something, this client wants something that is meaningful and how can I say this, makes sense for the context we're facing. Okay, you can apply something that worked somewhere else for their context. Otherwise, the client would just copy and paste, and so they want a custom-made approach. And like you're saying, a service design project that is disconnected with what we call institutional transition, right? Understanding institutional, how can we bring this to scale? Or a service design project that is um, disconnected to understanding stakeholders' context. What is the state A of the system? What are the business needs facing now, not as a limitation, but as understanding the now, right? Where sometimes, I guess you're referring, um, um, service design projects, they focus too much, and design projects as a whole, they focus too much on what we call understanding innovation dynamics, right? Where could we go, and forget where you are. So it becomes this, okay, it's a nice idea, but I don't know how to make it happen. Um, the ideal service design project would have three buckets of deliverables. One, showing clearly and um, given the limitation, of course, as much as it's possible given the resources and time available, that you understood what's happening now. And believe me, it's really, really easy to work on assumptions. The goal of providing a, as clear as possible an understanding what's happening now. So this would be a set of deliverables. Then your client will have another set of deliverables, which be the state B. Where where could we go? So what are the most interesting um, uh, opportunities to work for? And specifically, if we detail a little bit, we usually have like a continuum that go from disruption to routinization. Sometimes your project will actually be focused on streamlining a messy situation that is happening, or breaking or disrupting a very routinized situation, right? When all companies are offering the same thing, a service design project would strive for disruption. When all companies are offering different things and the market feels overwhelmed or lost, a service design project would offer streamline, a routinization, as Schumpeter used to call. So, most of the time, a project will be distributed around this. Part of the project will be to streamline, part of the project will be to disrupt. It's a combination of these things. I hope I tackle some. And anyway, Patrick, whenever you want to discuss about this, I would be happy to for us to have a discussion. Patrick has a really interesting book that we use here on our program. It's one of the books we use on our program too. So, yeah, I think we.
Yeah, could you share the name of the book with everybody?
Orchestrating Experience, right, Patrick? If I remember well, yeah. Yeah, it's a nice, really nice book. So breaking down service prototype. You're welcome, Patrick.
Yeah, we have, sorry, Mauricio, we have a question from Twin. Twin, would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question?
Hi, sure. Hi there, I'm Brandon. Just quickly, could you break out how you interface with circularity or the refinement of the value chain once it culminates, once everything's up and running, which is normally when a lot of people arrive? How do you score that circularity? How do you improve and refine it in that second cycle?
Oh, yeah. Again, we take very seriously the word design, right? Design, so we call state A, state B, is because there's no starting and end, right? So it's an ongoing process. There's no, we say we don't finish a project, we deliver the project with always with the hope that the client, the organization would review and rework iteratively forever. There's no end point. There's no even a goal set, if I can be very blunt about this. A service evolves every day, every time that someone engages in this service system. So and adjustments need to be made. Try to foresee this, the necessity, or predict or forecast from a design perspective makes no sense. You will keep evolving. That's the economic business cycle approach, the search dominant logic approach, and the same way that we care about the user interface, the same way that we care about the money flow on customer experience, the same way that we will care about fashion, how people are dressed, we will care about circularity, or for putting this, I guess, the donut approach, right? Like, what are the ceilings? How can we try keeping those the bottom and the ceilings in balance? We cannot overshoot, but we cannot leave people behind. So how can you plan for this type of system evolution, right? So again, we will discuss a little bit about, if we can go to the, let me start the breakdown, and you know, I guess we will tap into some of these approach, okay? So this is an article published at Touchpoint, breaking down service prototype, and the idea, the initial idea to write this actually started when we did the research that ended up with the three overarching perspective for service design after interviewing the service designers. And we heard a lot from them, sentences like this one in blue. Of course, this is a summary of several sentences that look like this. We tend to hear a lot these service designers saying, "Oh, we will develop prototypes to experiment and test the pilots of new products ideas." And every time that we heard this, we say, "Okay, this is all the same." So the question that we were asking was, okay, is prototype, experiment, test, and pilots all the same? Are these terms different? Or what do they mean when they put this all together? Okay, so sorry. Qualidade das coisas do mundo agora, meu Deus do céu, meu Deus, eu adoro os nomes que a gente não encontra mais. Okay. So to try.
Melhorei.
Okay. So to try to tackle this, to make sense of what they were saying when they mix all these terms together, we start to research about prototyping, and Stefan Homlid and Blomqvist, they have a couple of papers dealing with this, and it's interesting to see that, and we saw this when we interviewed our participants of the research, the service design, the participant, and they all had a very clear understanding that a prototype of a service will never match an actual real scenario, okay? And based on the framework proposed by Blomqvist and Homlid, we started to see a way to deal what they were saying. So basically, what they propose here is that the prototype that you're creating for a service will change depending on the position at which, during the service development, the new service development, you create these artifacts, okay? So a prototype at the beginning will have a set of characteristics. The prototype further down the road will have another one, other ones, and a prototype at the end will have other characteristics. Based on that, and the interview we had with the service designers, it was kind of clear, or at least seemed to make sense when we were devising this, that there are four. So if you understand a service design project starting from higher levels of uncertainties and moving to lower ones, you'd have prototypes happening at the beginning, then experiments happening at some point, and the more, like in an exponential curve, the more you go to the delivery phase, the more closer together each one of these prototypes happen, right? You need to increase uh, um, increase clarity, increase uh, focus. So it starts. So you have a first phase of prototyping, then you have a phase of experiments, and towards the end, they get closer together as you hone into some kind of end point for state B. Then it becomes tests and pilots. So just before we go through, so this would be the modeling through the Sean thing about design. At first, when high levels of uncertainty, you and basically towards understanding the stakeholders' context, you create as many as possible, as diverse as possible, as cheap as possible, as fast as possible, assessments and artifacts that can kind of map the opportunities. At some point, towards understanding where would be the where to go institution innovation dynamics, you'd have experiments. We will describe what would be the difference between them. So less alternatives, because some of these prototypes resulted was retained or selected by the environment, let's say, and you would invest more time and effort in less amount of possibilities. And when you start to devise how to implement, so we're calling institutional transition, you'd have even lesser alternatives with more time, more effort, costlier alternatives, up to the point that when you have pilots, you'd be very narrowly focused on fewer alternatives. So by all of them could be named based on long-list and only framework, could be named prototype. We think that giving them different words would help clients and stakeholders understand where we are, right? So how would it go, basically? And again, we propose a framework here. We will talk about this, but it's just as a starting point. As a designer, you have to hone this and adapt this to your context. From an initial briefing, you have a systemic, holistic understanding of context. You try to see the bigger picture, and at some point assess the knowledge. Do I have the knowledge to solve these broad questions or not? If I don't, then if I don't have the knowledge I need to answer this question are non-available or non-accessible, I need to create knowledge, and prototypes would be as an artifact that will enable you to explore unknown alternatives. So prototypes would be exploration into the unknown. Prototype should focus on quantity instead of quality, with as many as possible, as low cost as possible per unit, and as varied as possible, okay? In the second phase, once you have new available, so you transform the unknown alternatives into known alternatives. Okay, then you experiment. Oh, I thought I had, how do I decide which of these four I will go? So you develop, I'm having a sign here that that connection is open.
Mauricio, your connection is
Hello?
Yeah, we can't hear you clearly. Your connection is actually breaking a lot.
Okay,
Yeah, it's better now.
okay. So experiments would be logical, repeatable, and predictable. Okay, so you start to be more um, assertive and ways to assess which of these alternatives uh, are better. Okay, so experiments would be, let's say, at the half of the process. Um, and then towards the end, these experiments become tests. So the tests should be explicit, unambiguous, and experimentally correct. So the, the, the let's say the openness and the ambiguity that you would allow in the beginning of the project will start to shift towards a more controllable and actually uh, more precise way of assessing whatever alternatives seem to be the most promising. And pilots would be the validation itself. Okay, so as close as possible um, of the intended large-scale deployment context. And then after validation, you would go for scaling. So this would be the 4 different words to refer to prototypes to avoid what we heard a lot that clients usually don't like to put money on prototype because they think it's a waste of time, money, for various reasons. But if you could propose, or as we did some um, presentations for companies, and they thought it would be better to have these 4 words instead of calling everything prototype. Okay, and again, just to echo what the usually is done, and I mentioned this in the paper. Of course, this for simplicity, the process that I presented. This is a text from the D school, but people usually don't read when they try to implement design thinking, and they skip the last paragraph of the process book or the process guide. And actually, at the end, they say, um, for simplicity, the process here is articulated as a linear progression, but design challenge can be taken on by using the design modes in various orders. Okay, for the more than unlimited number, the framework is just a suggestion. Please hone it, hone your own process that works for you. And the most importantly, as you continue to practice, you can have a designerly mindset instead of just following blindly the whatever framework um, is given to you. So yes, you got this. Okay. If you are successfully developing new products, be it goods or service, uh, we think that by untangling the initial sentence that I mentioned, it would be easier to explain to stakeholders that the results of explorations made to prototype, which should be very cheap, diverse, and fast, will be evaluated by experiments, and further tests will provide decisive information, and at the end, running pilots to validate the service within an offering within the desired level of effectiveness and cost efficiency. I guess presenting the process through these 4 words, it, it helps stakeholders uh, understand that this is a continuous approximation process that we will, through which you actually will increase the levels of certainty, or better, reduce the levels of uncertainty. Okay? And but again, just going through the thing again, this is not a linear process. You're immersed in this service system. The state A, the state B, and the bridge should be an ongoing evolution. And so it by no means should be seen as a linear. And then the final reflection I would like to make is, given the situation we are now, in the high levels of uncertainty, I think what a service design perspective could bring is exactly the same thing. Like, we don't need to know the solution. Where should we go now? From now, we should be trying as many and diverse low-cost alternatives as possible now, and through time, structure them as we go along. And just to give a kind of context, I really enjoyed this book from Paul Cellier, that and he advocates for our description of the world need to have an inherent sensitivity for complexity. The COVID situation is one that clearly all of us, at least most of us, seem to understand that it's high levels of uncertainty. I don't know exactly how the solution should be. We can't start this process with a solution in mind. What is to go back to normal? Okay, what it means, it would be very hard to set in stone where should we go here, and the best would be to have a complex adaptive system approach to what's happening through prototyping, experiments, tests, and pilots. Thank you. This is it. If we have questions, I'll be more than happy to try to, and also feel free to send me emails if you would like to continue this discussion.
Thank you, Mauricio. This was very insightful. We have run over by 10 minutes, so I'll take 2 questions if anyone has, and then everyone can like really reach out to you if they have like more questions and if they want to talk more.
Perfect.
So, yeah. Shreya, thanks. Brandon is raising his hand. Brandon, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, hi. It's more like a high-level shift in the dynamic between consultancies and creative agencies. You know, as consultancies are encroaching on creative, and traditional agencies are responding with data and business transformation fluencies. Which do you think is the better tactic? I see, like, I work in both service design and visual design, but I often find it's hard to understand. Do we reach towards more of the consultancy angle and try to teach designers, visual designers, what consultancy and strategy around service design is, or do we do the reverse and go the other route and try to focus on really garnering the respect of visual and physical empathy to the strategy and consultancy world?
Brenda, my personal take on this is we're late to the game, right? So if you read a little bit of the most known thinkers of the last 100 years, not they think that we should be more systemically minded. System thinking should be um, adopted since the end of World War II. So we're actually late to the game. Okay, I had a very interesting experience this year. We had the alumni meeting, the Surf Design alumni meeting at SCAD Homecoming, happening in February, and the theme of the event was organizational adaptability. And afterwards, when the whole thing, COVID, happened, several participants and panelists came back and contacted me and said, wow, what a timely discussion. My goodness, it was perfect to discuss organizational adaptability at the gates of COVID-19. Thank you. And, you know, I felt kind of sad. I said, oh, we're late in the game, right? We should be applying and thinking through system since 1945. So when you ask me, oh, should we have a trade-off here and be more business-oriented or more, I think we should be more systemic. Can we be? I don't know, given the leaders, not only in companies, but nations that we see, especially me from Brazil, we're still like in the mindset, linear mindset that would require very, let's say, business is just business focus, or and we're really late to. If you think about Cillier writing this in 1998, and he go at lengths to make a case on we should be more sensitive for complexity. We can. It's better to work from a more complex perspective, but people still insist on making or either this or that. So I had a chance to discuss with several friends in companies, and I had they were kind to hear my vent, my philosophical vent, but I'm kind of okay, we're late and still talking if we should be more inclusive, more complex, and give me the solution. It's either A or B. I guess we are all seeing that nobody has control, definitive control in anything, right? Mighty corporations and mighty nations had to stop. So why not adopt things like this? Like, let's understand that there are high level of uncertainty. Let's prototype our way through. Oh no, but I need to have a definitive goal. No, we have to try, right? At the end, it needs to make sense, sustainable in the long run. So let's evolve this. Let's start working. If you ask, oh, should an approach be either business or more design oriented? Let's see case by case. It's feasible. It's profitable. If you think about big corporations like Amazon or Google, they embedded these cycles into their business model. They try out different things. The Google product sanitary is famous. How many things they fail